got on a bus and headed further south. The bus isn't very swift and stops suddenly and often. There was no room to sit, so we stood in the crowded aisle, clinging to the overhead handles. We ended up in Midigama, a small guest house. The waves in this area broke on a reef that was just offshore. There were surfers everywhere, trying to catch quite large waves. We spent a lot of time indoors. The heat was even more difficult to endure, given the chest cold that we both had contracted. I remember feeling very low during this time. I had a lot to think about concerning the new information I had about the world. There was no one around to relate to. Either they were interested in earning your money somehow, or were reluctant to speak to you. I couldn't venture out alone in fear of people asking to have sex or looking to rob us. The startling warnings the older man at the cafe had given us made us too cautious to venture into the rainforest. I had hoped that we would spend most of our time in such forests, and I was saddened by the instructions to not do so. George and I were both passive and often persuadable people. My own frustration concerning my inability to be decisive and resilient towards overbearing salesmen was soon projected onto George. I began blaming him for all the misfortunes we were experiencing. Between our poor health, lack of social contact, and irritability, we were enduring long, hot days of disagreement inside our only safe haven, a large bed beneath a mosquito net. I was in a complex stage of depression, feeling helpless in the face of issues too large to change myself, and an overwhelming sense of self-disappointment at my lack of resilience given my privileged life. Here I was, the descendant of the same race that devastated the cultures of so many civilizations around the world, and I couldn't do anything other than feel sorry for myself. And I was depressed by the thought of it all. Obviously, my mind was undergoing a fundamental change. One day we walked up the road to find an ATM. On the way back, we passed a fruit shop and bought every strange fruit we laid eyes on. We were very happy to return home and try it all. We got a tuk-tuk from the market back to the beach cottage. The man that dropped us off said to us, "You are innocent." I'm unsure of what he meant by this. Of course, George and I live simple lives and treat people as we ourselves would wish to be treated, but we thought this was a common practice among humans. The same tuk-tuk driver stopped later that day to give us each a cashew. That day we tried each of our new fruits, including soursop, which proved very tasty, but put us to sleep within just a few hours. The food in this area is not very good. Our stomachs have been in poor conditions, and the high heat has made it difficult to eat anything other than fruit. We live primarily on fruit smoothies. One day we woke up early and rented a set of snorkels and masks and swam out to a little island offshore. There were some reefs, but the coral looked unhealthy and broken, potentially the aftermath of the tsunami. The fish that we saw were colorful. Once on the island, we wandered around and found it was quite small. There were pandanus growing on a rocky hill, but not much more than that. The swim back was difficult due to a mild but steady current. Later, a man driving a cart pulled by a strange two-wheeled engine gave us a lift further down the road. We asked him if he wanted any money, but he was happy just to give us a ride. We finally decided that we should see some new scenery and got on the bus heading to Ila. Soon we were away from the ocean, surrounded by steep hills and plantations. This area, as we later learned, was the large estate of Lipton, the international tea giant. We arrived at the final bus station for a transfer to the local bus when several taxi drivers surrounded us and offered us their service. They told us the bus would not come for hours, and that when it did, it would take a long time to make it to Ila. We told them that we didn't mind, and we sat down where we were told we would find the bus. After sitting there for some time, a younger one of the taxi drivers came to us and said that the men had been lying and that we needed to get the bus on the other side of the station. On the way over to the other side, a pigeon pooped on my head. I was feeling quite embarrassed as local school kids stared at me. Oh well, I shouldn't have been so angry at the taxi drivers. Maybe this is what the pigeon was trying to teach me. We got the bus and then a tuk-tuk, and soon we were at Happy Laugh, a strangely empty, very large cement building with a large dance floor and several rooms on the first and second stories. While checking in, the man said we'd booked a tent. We found after some discussion that we had indeed booked a tent, even though this fact was hidden from easy view on the booking site. We asked to change to a room, given the amount of rain that was falling at the time. We decided to walk down the road to find a shortcut to the railroad line. We came to a dead end and needed to cut through a local yard and farm. The lady inside the house was happy to let us pass and pointed to a trail that headed downhill. We found a few leeches in the way, but made it safely to the tracks, where we wandered through tunnels and over a great bridge with many arches. While exploring the railroad, we came across two Greek travelers. We decided to meet them later that night at a more lively hostel called Tomorrowland. We went on a walk to a nearby hilltop called Adam's Peak. This is said to be a place where Lipton once sat watching his tea empire grow around him, a massive farm that is worked entirely by hand and likely by individuals that are paid very little for their work. In the past, these farms have operated on feudal-like systems where peasant people work in exchange for the land they live on under the instruction of a wealthy owner. Today, we have learned it is difficult for farm owners to find people to work for so little. Hopefully, education is slowly liberating children from potential servitude under such cruel conditions. That night we ended up at the hostel earlier than our Greek acquaintances, and found a group of Scots and English starving off boredom with various means of entertainment, including hide and seek and making fart noises on each other's arms. We asked them if they had seen any Greeks around. They said no, but helped us in our search by loudly questioning all who entered as to whether they were Greek or not. The Greeks finally came around, and we chatted for a while before heading home in the dark. Sometimes I can't make sense of the world. While some work endlessly as practical slaves, others go on vacation and are bored silly while staying right next door. On our way home, a man we passed asked us to stay in his home instead of walking back in the dark. He was really concerned that we were going to go without a taxi. We finally convinced him that we would be all right, and we continued our walk in the night. We only stayed in Nila for a few nights, and when we left, the owner of the guest house told us that we were different, that we were very innocent. That was the second time someone told us in Sri Lanka, and I am still puzzled over what they meant. Either we are naive or potentially not as demanding as other guests. He told us that we could get a bus further down the road, but we ended up getting a tuk-tuk instead. Soon we were on a very long but scenic train ride back to Colombo to catch the plane. On the way, we passed through rainforests and the sides of mountains, plantations, villages, farms. By the time we arrived in Colombo, a whole day and a half had passed. Our ears were dulled from the long, noisy ride. I was surprised about the rail being so close to the ocean. At times, only a few meters separate us and the waves of the sea.